Hey, this is Stevie J from Glove Up or Shut Up introducing the following clip to you. I was not able to be on the main portion of yesterday's show with our special guest Ryan Pike reviewing the UFC 161 card. However, Peter Harrison and Ryan were able to discuss it until I was able to finish with the Bellator recap, which ended about 15 minutes early, and then I was able to call in for the end of the show. So the following clip is Ryan and Peter discussing the UFC 161 card, main evented by Rashad Evans and Dan Henderson. Enjoy the audio, and we'll be back with more interview clips and updates to come. Stevie J, Glove Up or Shut Up.
We're going to call this the All-Canadian Show as we got Ryan Pike from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. How you doing there, Ryan?
Doing pretty good.
All right, we're going to talk UFC 161, which you attended live, and we might have some time for some news. So, Ryan, overall, what did you think of UFC 161?
It was an okay show. In terms of action, it was kind of all over the place. But in terms of crowd reaction, it was probably one of the better crowds I've ever seen live MMA in front of.
Now, do you attribute that to it being like a first-run town?
I'd say so. It's some of there was a lot of Canadians on the show, which kept the crowd hot through pretty much the entire prelim card and about half of the main card. But they were also just insanely into Dan Henderson and Roy Nelson. So the fact that they were both on the show meant that they were pretty much engaged in what was going on basically from the get-go.
Now, do you think the loss of the first, main event for the show, the title fight that was pulled, do you think that hurt the attendance?
I wouldn't say so. It was a sellout basically right away. And I think I was talking with Dave Meltzer about this a few weeks ago before the show, and he thought that, from a business standpoint, losing Hainan Barao wouldn't really hurt anything because I don't think Hainan Barao really means much to the casual fight fan. But, Rashad Evans and Dan Henderson was pretty much going to be the main drawing card no matter what.
Yeah, I think we joked that the bantamweight title is cursed when it comes to Canada. It never gets defended. But, I think it's great Winnipeg getting this show. It was great attendance. I'm still waiting for Ottawa to get a show, with Ottawa and Edmonton now the only two NHL cities not to get UFC. You gotta think those cities are on the radar.
I'd say so. And I have to go out of my way to say that the MTS Center is just an absolutely gorgeous facility. It's it's small compared to the other NHL rinks. I think the Saddle Dome in Calgary seats about 20,000. Bell Center Montreal I've seen shows in, and that seats about 23,000. And MTS only seats about 15, but it's just such a pillbox of a building. It traps sound, so I think that made the loud crowd even louder.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Montreal for UFC. I've been to numerous events at the Scotiabank Center. Sorry, they've renamed it now. It's now, for those who don't know, the Scotiabank Center, where the Ottawa Senators play, is now, as of July 1st, the Canadian Tire Center, which I don't know how we're going to nickname that one yet, but that holds 20,000, and I think with the crowd smaller, around 14,700, 15,000 fans, it almost felt like a Vegas show.
Yeah, I'd say so, but the big difference, I was talking with a few people after the show, the Vegas shows usually get what's known as the Vegas crowds, where you only get the really hardcore people coming for the prelims, and so when you're watching on FX or on Facebook, you have just the giant empty rows of seats seen in the background, and pretty much the only people watching the first few fights are press or friends and family. But for I believe the figure that Dana White had after the show is for the first prelim fight, they had about 11,000 people there out of an attendance of about just under 15. So it was an insanely loud early arriving show.
Yeah, I'm going to turn on the fights. It was funny because the Facebook fights, they were on Sportsnet. It was unannounced because at the weigh-ins, they only said the two Facebook fights, and they made a point to say at top of the hour, they're going to go at 8 o'clock, they're going to go to Sportsnet and FX. So 7 o'clock, my wife says, your UFC's on Sportsnet right now. I look and it's like, oh, it is. And the crowd was amazing. And I was like, is this like another show? I wasn't sure I was watching the UFC 161 prelim. I thought they were showing some other fights before the 8 o'clock fights, So it was really cool to see that. But I'm glad to see that it got casual and hardcore. I understand what you mean about those rows upon rows of empty seats. That it just frustrates me to see that, because it's like, is no one going to be here? And I know people are on the way, but it's like these guys are fighting in some cases for their jobs. You know what I mean?
And I gotta believe that for some of these guys, like I think Yves Jabouin was in the first fight, and he had a really fun opening fight. And you could tell for him, like, he's a guy who's fought in Vegas on those absolutely cavernous early shows. And you could tell it, he was energized by being in front of a really, really enthusiastic crowd. I think it made a lot of the fighters just, give a bit more.
We'll go through the card, piece by piece, but, one last thing I wanted to say about this gate was, a couple hours before showtime, Dana White put on his Twitter that the gate for this event broke MTS Center records at I think it would turn out to be 3.15 million. The previous record holder for MTS Center was the Rolling Stones concert with a $1.8 million gate.
Yeah, I think that's they broke the record in Calgary too. I think probably that was also a Rolling Stones record they broke.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I mean, I've heard that before, where they go into a town and they just break the record, but I wasn't sure. Is it still the Saddle Dome in Calgary?
Yeah, they keep changing the first word, but it was the Olympic Saddle Dome, and then the Pengrowth Saddle Dome, and then the Canadian Airlines Saddle Dome for a while, and now it's just the Scotiabank Saddle Dome. So as of July 1st, the Saddle Dome is the only building in the country named after Scotiabank.
Oh, jeez. And I heard after the thing about Canadian Tire Center, only 2 NHL arenas don't have corporate sponsorship, and they're both in New York. So go figure for that one. But we should get on this card. The first 2 fights were on Facebook and apparently YouTube, and I know they were on Sportsnet. Yves Jabouin beating Dustin Page via split decision, and Mitch Danger Zone Clark beating John McGuire by unanimous decision. Did the judges get this right for these 2 fights?
I'd say so. I think the split decision is probably about right. I thought you couldn't really give all 3 rounds for either guy, and I thought Jabouin was a little bit more active. He slowed down a bit in the third. So he was, he took a bit of a beating in the third, but the first 2 rounds you could pretty much easily say were Jabouin's rounds. And Clark had a great performance. After the fight, Clark was a little bit teary-eyed. He was obviously fighting for his job, and he knew it, and everyone in the crowd knew it. And I thought he did a fantastic job, fighting with desperation and, really giving his all. And, he didn't seem embarrassed at all to be crying. And, if your dream was to be in the UFC and, they told you better win this one, you'd be I think we'd all be reacting the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think when Jabouin came out to the theme from Mortal Kombat, that really I saw a lot of fans when they heard that, they just popped out of their seats. That was pretty cool. The judging for that one, it was very close. I mean, this is a fight where if you ask 10 judges, you're going to get 5 saying one way and 5 saying the other. It was very close. The Mitch Clark, John McGuire fight, I agree with the decision. It was 2-1 basically for Clark, but you could see in his face when he won that fight. As soon as Bruce Buffer announced it, you could tell like he needed this fight to basically keep his job. And you're right. And the pure emotion that was shown was just great.
Yeah, and the next fight, I believe, for the local crowd was the main event. I talked to a few people in the crowd afterwards, and this was easily the main event. Figueroa and Delorme. Delorme is from Winnipeg, hometown boy. At the weigh-ins, you would not know that this guy wasn't a main eventer to the crowd. And him and Figueroa put on a fantastic fight. I thought, it wasn't the world's greatest fight, but it's, a very entertaining back and forth fight. The fans reacted to anything Delorme did. They reacted really well to any grappling, and it was just a really good fight to start off the FX portion of the card.
Now, is this a story about Delorme working 3 years ago in a pizza joint just miles outside of Winnipeg?
It was, and then you had Figueroa with his awesome evil beard trying to dash the dreams of the local boy. You couldn't ask for better booking.
Oh yeah, you're gonna play the villain. You might as well play it to the hilt.
Yeah, Delorme was fantastic in the first round. He had the upper hand for most of the second round. He slowed down a bit in the third, and I think Figueroa, caught up to him. And I think all 3 judges had the fight 29-28 for Delorme. I think all 3 of them. They didn't give us round by round breakdowns, but they gave us the final cards. I think pretty sure all 3 of them had the first 2 rounds for Delorme, and then the last one for Figueroa.
Yeah. Well, the next fight, it's one of those things where I think it was Dana White on his Twitter said that Robertson got robbed on this one. Sean Pearson beat Kenny Robertson via majority decision, 29-28, 29-28, and 28-28. Those who didn't see it, Robertson laid a beating on him late in or basically all throughout I think it was the third round or the second round, where Pearson's face just was a bloody mess. And, one judge gave him a 10-8 round for Robertson. That was the one dissenting vote, I guess. The other two judges gave a 10-9 for Robertson, making it 29-28 times 2, and Pearson gets the victory. What do you think about these two fighters, and do you think Pearson deserved to win?
I had it 29-28 for Robertson. I thought Pearson was really good in the first round, and then sort of tired out. And I thought Robertson, controlled more of the fight in the last 2 rounds. Pearson had a good flurry at the end of the third round. He was in a rear naked choke, but it was kind of like a pro wrestling spot. He sort of powered out of the rear naked choke right at the very end. But I thought that Robertson did more during the last 2 rounds to really earn the fight. But this was the first fight that I thought was sort of oddly judged.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few of them on this one.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, there were. The next one, James Krause beats Sam Stout late in the third round with 13 seconds left on the clock via guillotine choke. And I think on my scorecard I had Sam Stout winning this fight if it went to the judges, but he couldn't hang on for 13 more seconds, and Krause got the victory.
And the odd thing was, I think both was for the first 2 rounds, 2 of the judges had Krause winning 2 rounds, and then the third judge had them splitting it. And I'm pretty sure that Stout was losing the third round. He was really trying to catch up, but even if he won the third round, he would have lost by a split decision.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't hold on either way.
No, that choke was in very, very deep, and I texted Stevie afterwards, during one of the breaks in the fight, and I just said Crimson Mask because he was late because I think he was going to Dave & Buster's to watch the show and recap it for the site, and he gets to the bar and they're not showing UFC shows anymore there, so he drove all the way back home, and he was playing catch up for the first couple of fights. I just wrote Crimson Mask, wait for it, and he texted me back and he goes, "Yep, I see what you mean."
that was kind of interesting live because you sort of saw Stout and Krause do an exchange and then go to the mat, and I see Krause come up and he's just covered with blood. I'm like, when did Krause get hit with something that would have split him open? Maybe they clashed heads or something. And then it wasn't until about the round break that I realized that it was Stout that was cut, and it was off of a high kick that Krause did before Stout took him down. So I was very confused briefly until I figured out what was going on.
Now, how are the seats at Press Row?
They're quite nice. I gotta give a shout out to the UFC PR crew in Canada, Steve Coe and Carolyn and them. They run a ridiculously tight ship, but they also run a ridiculously it's ridiculously well organized, and they get you things exactly when you need to. They let you know what's going on. I've been to a lot of events that are very poorly managed, and the UFC is most definitely not. They have their stuff really well together.
So you're saying they do a lot better than Bellator, for example?
I have a friend of mine who I believe he is covering Bellator today, but he did not receive his credential acceptance for today's show until yesterday.
Yeah, I got the same story. Yeah, that's who I was referring to. Yeah. It's kind of embarrassing to hear that. It's like, oh wow, like, are you sure you can still make the show? It's tomorrow. Like, what? But
thankfully, the UFC lets you know about these things almost a month in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm sure UFC gets a lot more requests for credentials than Bellator.
Yeah, and then I think a fight that really should have been better than it was, and I think people thought that this would be a grappling battle, Woodley and Shields.
Oh yeah.
If you went into the crowd and asked people which one was the worst fight, it'd be between this one and the Jimmo Pokerjack fight on the main card. Woodley and Shields. Woodley came into the weigh-ins and he looked absolutely jacked. He looked energetic. He looked pumped. Shields looked like he had just spent 3 weeks in a sauna and hadn't eaten a meal in months. And then come to the fight, Woodley just had no answer for anything that Shields was going on. I think Woodley, he tried to engage, but he didn't really have any answer for Shields. I think Shields game planned the fight really well and just kept, keeping Woodley to the outside and tiring him out. But the crowd hated this. During this show, the crowd sort of seemed to have a very bizarre love-hate relationship with grappling. Like, if two guys are striking, crowd loved it. They, want to see guys exchange. If it went to the mat, there's a lot of times where, you've seen on shows where people get, they get taken down and they start grappling and the crowd just has no patience for it. Here, the crowd seemed to be really engaged in what was going on. Guys going for submissions. There was a few sweeps, particularly if a Canadian was on the bottom and they did a sweep and were on top. Crowd loved it. But any time that the fight went to the wall and guys were sort of grappling against the wall and sort of clinching, crowd just booed the heck out. Oh, yeah.
The boo birds were out in full force in this one on TV, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was not a fight people particularly liked. I think Dana White at the end of this tweeted that he thought Woodley got robbed. I thought Woodley was more energetic in the first round, but Woodley, if at the end of this fight, you saw two guys that were gassed, one guy was sort of beat up a bit more. I'd say Shields probably won it. I think I had Shields 29-28, and I think it was a split decision. I think for somehow, and God help me, I can't figure out how you could have judged this. One of the three judges gave it a 30-27 for Woodley, and everyone in press row was aghast and tried to figure out who gave it to them. And we got an answer, and it was confusing because every time on the show, every time there was a weird split decision or a weird judging decision, there's always one judge who was a little bit weird, but it was always a different judge in every fight. So it was absolutely confusing. But yeah, the less said about this fight, the better. No one came out of this fight looking particularly good. But Shields really needed to win and did what he needed to do to get it.
I can't even say Woodley learned more from a loss than a win of this fight because both fighters didn't look good. And the judging, I agree. Like, how does one judge give all three to Woodley and the other two go 2-1 for Shields? It's like, wait, are you watching the same fight? And whenever I see a discrepancy like this, sometimes you'll see it, although it's rare now, but sometimes people miscalculate the scores. Like, how is your math so bad? You count 10-9, 10-9, 10-9.
Yeah, I couldn't, it made no sense to me whatsoever.
Well, let's talk about the main pay-per-view portion of the card, and Sean Jordan made quick work of Pat Barry, 59 seconds of the first round via TKO, and this was over before you knew it.
Yeah, the crowd really liked both guys, especially Pat Barry, who's, I believe he still trains in Minnesota, and I think a lot of the crowd here was driving up from Minnesota and North Dakota, so, they had their obvious favorite. They didn't really hate the first finish actually I think the second finish of the night, but the first, early finish of the night. They went in, they traded, Jordan got the better of it, and then Jordan finished him. And it was very quick and very energetic, and the crowd loved it.
Yeah, I think Pat Barry, his fan base in Minnesota is because he's training with Brock Lesnar out there in Minnesota, and he was an assistant coach at the latest season of The Ultimate Fighter, so he's been training for a while for this fight, and I'm just surprised it was a 59-second fight, and I predicted last week, I said if Barry loses this fight and loses badly, it might be curtains for him. After watching this fight, I don't think it's curtains for him, but if he gets knocked out again in his next fight, it won't look so good.
Yeah, I think it's obvious, Pat Barry's really charismatic, and he's a fun fighter. He never really has boring fights. Occasionally has, fights he loses for stupid reasons, like, we all remember the wonderful fight he had with Krokop in Vancouver. That was
wonderful.
Just a thriller, but he lost because he was stupid.
Yeah.
And I think he'd probably admit as much. But he was, it was a good fight. I think he'll be kept around for a while.
All right. First time in Canada women's bantamweight fight on UFC soil. Alexis Davis beating Rosie Sexton, unanimous decision, 29-28, and by two of the judges, and 29-27 by a third judge. Good technical fight here, and Davis definitely brought her A game.
Yeah, I think I judged this the same way that one of the judges did, the 29-27 judge. I think that judge must have had, I think everyone had the first round for Sexton. She came out there and she was in a triangle, but it wasn't really tight, so she just kept punching Davis in the face, and the crowd loved this. It was another example of really fun grappling that the crowd liked. The second round was essentially just Sexton getting taken down and getting pounded on forever, but she was active, and when Herb Dean at the end of the fight said, "Hey, you better do something," she was at least moving around and showing signs of life. And then the third round was sort of a bit more back and forth, a little bit less tilted as the other fights were. But I'd say it was a fun fight.
I thought this fight was going to get stopped at the end of the second because Herb Dean was saying, I'll stop it. He said like 3 times. And I'm thinking, just pull the trigger already.
Yeah, from up close, they were, the striking from the back mount was, it was essentially, ridiculously light punches, like sort of, getting tapped on the back of your head over and over and over again. And she was doing her best to be active, but it's hard to really defend yourself intelligently when someone's got you in the back mount. But she was trying, but I don't know if he had stopped at the very end of that round, I don't think anyone really would have complained. But I think considering that the crowd was into this fight because of Alexis Davis, I think it was probably the right move to keep it going.
I think it depends on the referee. I think if it was like Josh Rosenthal or Mazzagatti, it probably would have been stopped. Actually, if it was Mazzagatti, it probably wouldn't have done anything. But geez, don't get me started about Mazzagatti after what happened in last week there in Bellator. That was just, or was it? Sorry, not Bellator. World Series of Fighting.
After the press conference, Dana went on a tirade about Mazzagatti, and then he thought to himself, he thought out loud, "Well, now that I've complained about him, they're going to give him the Anderson Silva fight. Just you wait."
Oh God, no! Oh God, don't say that. Oh my God!
He says that every time he complains about Mazzagatti, they end up giving him a big fight to prove that they're not biased. So,
I think they should be. Well, I know they can't really predict who can be the referee for the fight, but I'm hoping it's either Dean or Yamasa or what's his name? Shoot, the Asian referee.
Yamasaki.
Yamasaki, thank you. Yeah, I hope it's one of those two, because if it's like Rosenthal or Winslow or Mazzagatti, I'll be just tearing my hair out.
Yeah, I was. The women's fight was the fight I was kind of nervous about because I wasn't sure how if the women had a fight that was less than thrilling, if the crowd would just get all over it. But the crowd throughout the night was very intelligent, very respectful, and I even with the drunks fighting in the crowd later on, I thought it was. This was when I thought this was a good market for UFC after the women's fight.
Oh yeah, no, I was sure like the women's fight would be well received in the Winnipeg market, and I'm glad to see Alexis Davis win. I'm sure it would be different if it was a non-Canadian fighter. It might be a different story, but the crowd was behind Davis, and she got the W. But let's move on. Ryan Jimmo beating Igor Pajek, unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board, and sadly no robot after the fight was over.
Yeah, Jimmo was very unhappy with his performance. He did enough to win. Pokrajic was not especially good at all, and Jimmo is better than not especially good, so he got the win. He apologized after the fight, but there was actually a fight during the third round, at the very end of the third round in the crowd, and a gentleman got, I believe, knocked out cold. So the fans were really distracted, and after the show, when he was talking with the crowd, Dana White was sort of laughing to himself, going, "It's like, well, you have a bad fight, and the crowd's going to fight, to entertain themselves."
Yeah, exactly. The thing about Jimmo, I think he was very, very conservative in his fight plan. He didn't want to take too much of a risk. I'm not sure if that was because of his last fight or because he just didn't want to look bad in front of the Canadian crowd, but it was a very different Jimmo than what you're used to seeing.
Yeah, but then again, realistically, he's fought in the UFC 3 times now. His last fight was not especially good. This fight, he was better than a guy who was terrible. And, in his first fight, he won in 7 seconds. So it's really hard to tell what we have with him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm sure next fight, Jimmo will go back to his aggressive ways, and hopefully we'll get the robot. But let's look at the semi-main event. Stipe Miocic beating Roy Nelson via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. And Kev gave me a stat. Roy Nelson sets a record for eating 437 significant strikes without a knockout.
Yeah, I think that's his. I think that's his UFC career. Dave, in his report on the Observer website, noted that Miocic he landed 137 punches over a 3-round fight. 117 of them were to Roy Nelson's head. Roy Nelson did not go down. He did not. He was staggered briefly, but staggered for Roy Nelson is different than staggered for regular human beings. He took an ungodly amount of punishment. It appeared his entire strategy was, I'm just going to stand here, put my hands down, and let this guy tire himself out punching me in the face, and then hopefully counterpunch him. And the counterpunch never came.
That's the Homer Simpson defense. It doesn't work.
Yeah, Miocic's, he's in shape. You look at these two guys and you thought, oh my goodness, how are these two guys in the same division? Like Nelson, with his gut is so much bigger than half the guys in the division, and he was not moving around at all. Like at the press conference, you've never seen somebody who looked more tired in your entire life. He looked like he just wanted to get an ice pack and a Big Mac and then go have a nap somewhere.
Did they address the rumors about Nelson's next fight against possibly Mark Hunt?
They're both sort of at the press conference. Both Dana and Roy were a little bit bullish about his future in the UFC. Like Roy wants to be there, he says, and Dana says that he wants him to be there because Roy will fight wherever the fans want him to fight, and I think the best fights for him are in the UFC. But they didn't really talk much about his future outside of the broad strokes that they want to get into a room and then sort of figure out a deal, but it's got to be a deal that works for both of them. So they were saying a lot without saying much of anything.
Yeah, I think it was his last fight in his current contract as well. So I think that also went into consideration. They didn't want to speculate because they might not even sign him. You don't know.
I think they should. I think when it comes down to it, they probably will come up to a deal eventually, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Roy take a fight or two outside of the UFC. I think if he's trying to negotiate, I don't think he'll go to Bellator because I don't think Bellator's a good fit for him. But I think if he takes a fight or two in the World Series of Fighting or somewhere like that could fit.
Yeah. Well, let's talk the main event. Rashad Evans beating Dan Henderson via split decision, 29-28 times 2. Boy, this was a good fight, and I picked Rashad to win, but watching the fight, I don't know. When I scored it up, I was looking at the scorecard. I was like, did I really just give that fight to Dan? Because it was a very close fight, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I think you could have given. It was just easily a split decision fight. I don't think you could give all 3 rounds to either guy. But I thought, Evans. He executed his game plan more. I thought it was very similar to his game plan for the Rampage fight, where Rampage has the power, so Evans sort of had to fight a bit more of a perimeter fight and sort of grind things out. And I think he did that. But I think after the fight, Henderson was a bit negative on how he fought the third round. He thought he fought well enough to win the first 2 rounds, and he didn't think he won the third. And I don't think he got the third on any scorecards.
Yeah.
So I think the judges agree with him. But outside of him getting a bit tired in the third round, I thought Evans and Henderson both tried really, really hard.
Yeah, no, I agree, and hopefully we see Henderson again. He is 42, and age is I don't know. Like, how many more fights do you think Dan has left in the tank?
Well, I think everyone who keeps saying no, 1 or 2 always looks silly because then he fights for 3 or 4 more fights. He's still reasonably healthy. He was sort of he was sort of hesitant to talk about maybe dropping down to 185 because I think it's a harder weight cut for him now that he's older. But there's some interesting fights at 205 for him. Like I could see him sort of taking over the Stephan Bonner gatekeeper role in 205 and fighting on like the semi-main or the third from the top on pay-per-views against up-and-coming guys. And there's still a lot of interesting fights left.
That's a heck of a gatekeeper, though, if you got a former Pride and Strikeforce champion as a gatekeeper.
Well, exactly. Like, you can use him to sort of, if you want to have him fight guys like Bader or, guys like that, or sort of just the younger guys coming up and, be the first big name they fight. I think, he's not an elite level fighter anymore. He's got, a lot of holes in his game, particularly his cardio. He will just get tired a lot in the third round. But he's one of those guys that he's still really dangerous. He's got very good wrestling, very good submission defense, good grappling. He's, very good, as a striker. He's got that power. So I think he's one of those guys that you got to watch out for.
Maybe we see him fight Glover.
I would pay money to see that.
Yeah, that'd be really good. But Ryan, we know you're short on time this week. Thank you for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Not much. I'm still doing fight coverage and predictions and stuff for every major UFC show for TopTalkMMA.com over at Mike Sawyer's site. So check that out. Sort of doing a bit of everything. I'm over here in Calgary, ramping up for what's hopefully going to be a very interesting and busy NHL draft. So if you're at all interested in hockey or NHL coverage, check out thehockeywriters.com or flamesnation.ca. I write for both those sites covering the Calgary Flames and the NHL.
All right. Well, thanks again, Ryan.